Welcome to The Application, the podcast series from Side Business School, featuring some of the extraordinary personalities who were offered a place on the Executive MBA here at Oxford University. I'm Cathy Harvey. As Associate Dean, I've been involved with the people who've embarked on this journey for over half the 20 years since the programme was established. This is my chance to reconnect with them and to hear more about their struggles and their achievements, personal and professional, and to learn the leadership lessons we can all take from these inspiring alumni.
It's often yourself that kind of holds you back, but you don't realise it. You put all sorts of other barriers in the way of they won't let me, I'm not good enough, and that's all in your head, so just have a go.
Joining me now for this episode of The Application is Dr. Rebecca Weston. Rebecca's one of the most senior female leaders in the European nuclear industry and the UK's top civil servant, the Director General in fact, in charge of the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defence Warhead Group. She oversees the country's nuclear deterrent. I think that's what this title really means. So this is a job which requires more expertise, more judgment, more leadership than many of us will ever have to exercise in our lives. A physics graduate, Rebecca came to this role after another very challenging job in the nuclear reprocessing industry at Sellafield in Cumbria in the United Kingdom, and managed to study for an executive MBA at Oxford University. So not bad. So by anybody's standards, Rebecca, you have achieved a huge amount professionally. But I'd like to start the conversation not with your official CV, not where that begins, but perhaps talk a little bit about your own beginning and your own childhood. You're a physics graduate, so did you come from a family of physicists, or were your beginnings entirely different?
Probably couldn't be further from physics. So my parents were teachers, actually. My dad was the first to go to university in his family, the youngest of 9. The rest of his siblings straight into work from as soon as you could leave school, to be honest. So I felt very privileged, actually, to grow up in that kind of environment where sort of learning and was really encouraged. But how I ended up a physicist with a historian and a French teacher as parents still is a mystery to this day. So I grew up in Skegness, which usually elicits 2 reactions from people. One, laughter, and the second is that in Scotland, and that's still true.
I'm smiling now, but I promise I'm not laughing. And so when you were growing up, when you reached sixth form and you were thinking about your future life and your future career, how certain were you that you wanted to have a scientific career?
Do you know, I think that's still a really hard thing for young people to kind of think through. I certainly didn't know what I wanted to be when I was that age. Science seemed a great option just because it opened so many doors, and I was really interested in actually exploring new things. Science kind of led to new possibilities, I suppose, is one way of thinking about it. And actually, if I hadn't gone to Oxford to study physics, I was headed to Southampton to do space physics, which I think would have led to a lot more travel in my sort of early career, because all the telescopes and big science kind of places all seemed in pretty cool places, be it Hawaii or the States or elsewhere.
There's still time, Rebecca, there's still time. But we talk a lot now about women in STEM, and there's a lot of encouragement for young women who want scientific careers. But how difficult was it for you when you started your career? I know you studied for your doctorate after your first degree, but how hard was it for you when you were in that early phase of your career to make an impact as a woman in a scientific role in an industry, and in the nuclear industry, which is very male-dominated?
It is. I mean, it's really interesting. I'm not sure that the stats have changed that much. I really thought they would have changed a lot more. I mean, dancing around a bit, Cathy, in terms of what was it like being a woman in STEM. I mean, probably not too much different from what it's like being a woman in STEM now in some respects. I think we still need to change the dial in terms of women in STEM and really make that much more the norm.
Well, I know that you very much do your part, and perhaps we'll come back to this later in our conversation, but what I'd like to do is to just get a sense of what it's like for someone in your position to be at a dinner party or a wedding or meeting somebody new and to talk about what you do and see their reaction? And it's a bit of a conversation stopper. You know, I work with nuclear deterrence, or I work in the nuclear industry. How do you deal with that? And how do you process some of the sort of complex responsibilities that you have?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I mean, there's always a kind of glib answer to those kind of things. But I suppose the serious answer is with respect and sensitivity, recognizing that the deterrent and what that means actually elicits a huge range of emotions in people, and rightly so. I mean, just as an aside, I mean, I've insisted that Oppenheimer is now on the induction program for anyone that's joining the Warhead programs, and that's really to get people to think about what they're doing and just sort of have that sort of, if you like, internal dialogue and just understand kind of what we're getting into, and I think that was actually quite well done in the film in terms of that sort of turmoil about what does it mean, and then how do we responsibly harness and hold, I suppose, the nations being a nuclear power.
Interesting.
So yeah, so what do I say to dinner parties? It entirely depends where I am and what I think the reaction will be to some degree. On the one hand, I've had the response, "That's amazing. That's the best job title in the world." And then, as you might imagine, that has been the end of a number of conversations as well. But I mean, genuinely, it's something that I think we need to talk about more.
Well, it's interesting to think of UK civil servants sitting down in the home cinema to watch the film Oppenheimer. I suppose that it is difficult for most people to understand the detail of what you do, but many people would understand some of the challenges, some of the leadership challenges that you have faced. I wonder if you could talk a bit about when you took the job at Sellafield and perhaps summarise for people who don't understand what it is, what those challenges were when you first arrived, because that was really your biggest challenge before this role that you're in now.
So I was at Sellafield for the best part of 20 years. I joined just after doing my PhD and spending a couple of years working for a small sort of engineering manufacturing firm. Tried my hand at engineering consultancy, wasn't for me, and joined British Nuclear Fuels, which promised worldwide travel and actually a very expansive sort of role within the nuclear industry. I spent most of my sort of 20 years at Sellafield, and I started there, and that was incredibly eye-opening and interesting. For people who don't know it goes beyond what you read in The Guardian. I mean, it's just an incredible hotbed of committed people really trying to responsibly clean up what was the result of ultimately delivering the UK's deterrent, but also the UK becoming a world leader in civil nuclear power generation in the 50s and 60s. So cleaning up that deterrent, but actually it still has a role today in keeping the lights on in this country, dealing with the spent fuel from EDF's advanced gas-cooled reactors, and we'll do that until they're defueled over the course of the next sort of decade or so, and a whole host of other things in between. I mean, I joke with US colleagues that have a very extensive estate in all sorts of remote quarters of the US, over hundreds of square miles, and we have all of the same capabilities and challenges within a couple of square miles at Sellafield. And coming back to your kind of point about sort of leadership challenges, I mean, when I first arrived, one of the big challenges was, as ever, by people joining organisations and sort of learning their way about it. How do you get your voice heard? How do you get new ideas listened to? Ultimately, how do you influence? And I guess that's the secret of leadership. There's a limit to how many people you can tell what to do and how effective that is. Ultimately, it's about learning what drives people, what motivates, and Sellafield was certainly a rich tapestry in that sense, with a range of people that had to do the jobs there. It's a town in its own right that has all the facets of that. pushing the boundaries of science and engineering, but the very mundane of managing the drains and washing the underpants that goes with it as well.
Well, I think you mapped out in that answer so many different aspects of a really big leadership role. I'm sure you spent a lot of time thinking about them. But while you were at Sellafield and managing all those many different things, you took the rather risky decision, I think, to take time out as well and pause and come back to Oxford to study for your executive MBA, which is where I met you and where I was really impressed when you were one of the few students who opted to do a practice essay. You were very keen and very conscientious. Tell us a little bit about that decision amidst all those leadership challenges to take time out, because you were involved in a cultural transformation programme at Sellafield, and you talked a bit about that while you were on the programme. So tell us about that decision and then how your executive MBA experience was then reflected in the decisions you made.
Yeah, and incredibly, that was over a decade ago now, I think, Kathy, which seems incredible. But the Ember, I mean, great that these things turn out in hindsight, but it was a really good decision in hindsight. It was actually really quite a good time in my career to kind of sort of take that sort of step back into education. I mean, executive education worked really well. It was a huge commitment given the full-time job and sort of stepping out a week at a time, but really worth it. I mean, I still draw on some of those lessons now and bring those things to life. And some of those modules that I learnt the most from. I mean, I still remember I took entrepreneurial finance, which had absolutely zero relevance as far as I could see at the start to my job at Sellafield. But I just thought that'd be really fun. That'd be really interesting, and it really, really was. It kind of goes to show that it is true about that having an open mind, that open mindset versus kind of a closed mindset, thinking you know all the answers, is something that I think the Ember really did well. I mean, it was great to be in the room with so many nationalities, so many different disciplines and approaches as well. And that decision, as I say, you try and sort of take steps back, steps out, and just kind of reflect every so often in your career. And Ember was really good for me at that point. And because it was at the time that I was doing that sort of transformation programme, which was essentially bringing Sellafield back into government ownership, having been in private ownership for the previous decade, and a real sort of cultural challenge around that, but actually a really practical challenge as well in terms of operating models, process, etc. So almost the structures of the Ember kind of helped with that, but also, as much as anything, gave some time for reflection.
Everybody at Oxford was very interested in your job and what you were doing and how the faculty could help. So it's good to know that that was a good pause for you. I know that to the outside eye, your career looks stellar, but I know also that you've had many challenges, and you know, sometimes you learn as much from the things that go wrong, from the failures that you've experienced or the challenges that you couldn't meet. What are they for you?
That's always the question I really hate in interviews.
I'm sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. It's kind of that you forget all those sayings, but it's almost you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes, and that is so true. And how do you genuinely learn from those things? Because it is really easy to kind of, when you've had a bit of a knockback, you kind of blame somebody else, and it's like, oh well, it's like they just didn't get the right person, or they should have picked me, and that's like that's on them. And it's like you can't take it like that. I've always tried to take that as well. So what can I learn from that? How would I react differently? How would I put myself in a better position or a different position going forward? And I mean, I don't see almost big things. I don't pull out kind of one or two things as as almost where that's gone wrong. I think life's very much a kind of series of little ups and little downs, and in a career sense, I suppose. In that sense, I mean, personal life. I mean, everyone has life going on, so to speak, and I mean, I think as you get older, you tend to have more life things interacting with work as well. So, in terms of sort of challenges that I've faced, what would I pull out? I think there's always jobs that you wanted that you didn't get. I think there's always, for me, there's always frustrations about getting, I suppose, the same feedback time and time again, which on one hand you try and listen and learn from, and on the other hand you've got to stay authentic and true to yourself. And I think that's easier to do as you get older and kind of build a bit more experience and get more comfortable in your own skin and your own way of doing things. I suppose that's kind of how I'm really trying to continue to learn and sort of develop and move forward. And I think one of the biggest roles of every sort of leader is to develop the people coming behind you. You only hold these roles, and I've had the privilege to hold some very cool roles in my time, and some that you really only hold for the next person. You try and make it better for the people coming after you. Really try and put some foundations and sustainability in place.
I want to talk a little bit about your personal life in a minute, but just thinking about the way you're reflecting on your own challenges, would you say that it is true that women seek perfection more than men, or is that too glib an assessment?
So, probably. I mean, I've always kind of struggled with the kind of women and men thing. I actually think there's a lot about how do introverts versus extroverts succeed or respond in leadership situations, or sort of get pushed forward for development or take opportunities more than others. And I suppose being a definitely committed introvert that has to kind of demonstrate extrovert tendencies to deliver in some of the roles that I've had, that's very much a learned behaviour, and a learned behaviour because I wanted to do something and to make an impact and to deliver. So I suppose that the perfection thing, I think certainly, again, I see it more in personality traits, which may be more prevalent in females than males, but I see it much more through a lens of almost personality traits, and it can be pretty crude to think the kind of the female sort of male dynamic. But that said, Kathy, I mean, I won't pretend I've had a very direct experience of being treated differently, and I can see that in even today in some of my current sort of working environments, a very distinct difference depending on gender position as to how you're treated, and it's gonna take a while before we truly get to society that's got a better level of equity and sort of equality and respect for everybody. But we've got to keep striving for that every day.
Thank you. That's a very thoughtful answer, actually. I know that while you were at Sellafield, you also did take more time to enjoy, as you described, more of life, not just work. You got married, you had a son. How important is that part of your life to you? And how do you balance that kind of enjoyment of a personal life and being a parent alongside the kind of role that you have now?
Again, I could give a glib answer there. You'll have to ask my wife. So how important is it to me? So incredibly important. So my wife and my son, we're just a very tight unit. I spend a lot of time away from home at the moment in the current role, and that's really difficult. He's also at the age that he actually notices now. When I was at Sellafield and so perhaps first took this role, he's 6, so it wasn't wasn't so aware of kind of time and the sort of comings and goings, and very aware of that now. And we've, I suppose, balanced that by what does that mean we can do as a family? How do we make the most of the time when we do have that together? And that's certainly meant he's had rather more time in different parts of the country than he would have done perhaps if I was still working at Sellafield.
Has parenthood changed you?
No, I don't. No, not changed. I mean, what it? How to describe it? I mean, I don't know. You'll have to ask other people. I don't think it's changed me. To some degree, I've been surprised by quite how all-encompassing I suppose, just commitment that you just make. That just sort of goes without saying. It's just great to kind of go home to that sort of sense of perspective from
I'm going
from
home to the mess.
Which
yeah.
So has it? I don't know. I mean, family. It gives a very clear boundary between sort of work and home life, which perhaps wasn't always there sort of previously. But I would credit my wife with much of that as well, and we're continually just really trying to strike the right balance. She runs her own business. She's a psychotherapist, and she's doing a brilliant job at that. So between us, we are really trying to have it all. So they say. I mean, you just have to work really hard at it. I mean, that's kind of a secret to a lot of things. I think, Kathy, you can almost have whatever you want if you're prepared to kind of really work and sort of get after those things. And I think you'll have heard more stories of that kind of thing than I have when you hear some of the incredible stories of some of the Ember colleagues and the like who've really gone after their sort of respective dreams and look at what they've achieved. And I don't think any of those got it handed on a plate. And certainly any of those that with sort of strong family units and things as well, that comes with work and support that you kind of work at as a team. And I think that's what we really try and do in Team Weston as well.
We're spending so much time, but I could carry on for far longer. I just want to ask you one more question about the nuclear industry, and then perhaps we can conclude with something a little bit more personal. The nuclear industry brings forth so many different opinions, and it is so multifaceted, from defence to sustainable future of energy, artificial intelligence. Everything about it is complex and controversial. How do you respond to the difficulty of dealing with so many complex questions? And how do you feel yourself about the future of the nuclear industry?
So, how do I feel about the future of the nuclear industry? I mean, you say they're sort of controversial in it. And I mean, yeah, there's kind of no way getting away from that. I mean, in terms of the future, I'd really like to see that it's not controversial, that it's got it, that people recognise the part to play. You're seeing kind of some of those strides, the kind of move into green taxonomy for nuclear. And if you look at the challenges of electricity generation, but just sort of needs of energy of the UK going forward. If you just look at the kind of energy density that nuclear allows, the kind of land mass you require to supply the UK compared to wind farms is just astronomically different. And I mean, it's just, let's have that as a proper public discourse and dialogue, so people can kind of actually compare apples and apples, because wind farms don't come without environmental penalty. Let's just make sure we're actually taking some of these long-term decisions with eyes open, I think, is how I'd characterise the nuclear industry.
When you filled in your executive MBA application all those years ago, and don't worry, I'm not going to drag it out and tell you what you said, you had to say something about your ambition and what you hoped for your career. I wonder, what will you say now if you had to write that application again?
I don't know. I don't know. I generally don't know where my career will go next. I mean, I have committed a huge part of my career to the nuclear industry, to actually women in STEM and sort of development and the like. I don't see that trajectory particularly changing. I think there's still a lot to do in terms of sort of influencing the future.
Rebecca, you've been very candid and very inspiring, and your Oxford friends are delighted to have you as part of the community. I just wanted to ask you one more question, which I'm asking all my podcast guests. Rebecca, what's the best piece of advice you think you were ever given?
I don't know. This is where everyone says that their mother gave them like some like brilliant bit of advice. I either wasn't listening or there was just no pearls of wisdom in that sense. And she was brilliant, so she will have given me loads of great advice.
What advice would you give others? What's your best piece of advice to give anyone listening?
So my kind of like personal mantra is how hard can it be? So if someone else can do it, why can't I? It's often yourself that kind of holds you back, but you don't realise it. You put all sorts of other barriers in the way of kind of, they won't let me, I'm not good enough, and that's all in your head. So just have a go.
Rebecca, this has been a fascinating and really insightful conversation. It has been lovely to be with you again and to hear your story. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kathy.
You've been listening to The Application from Oxford University's Side Business School. You can catch up with all our episodes wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to know more about Side Business School, take a look at the Oxford Answers section on our website, or check out the programme pages for more inspiring stories about our Executive MBA alumni. The Application is produced by Philippa Goodrich and Oxford Digital Media. I'm Kathy Harvey, Associate Dean at Side Business School. Thank you for listening. Oh my God, I wanted to carry on and on and on. Oh, I just really enjoyed that.